And so I get to the very top of the Ferris wheel. You know how they stop the Ferris wheel so they can put other people on at the bottom? And so ever so often they would stop the ride and the buckets would just sit. And my bucket, as I got higher and higher, my bucket would just rock more and more and more. And so, of course, I was sitting there and holding on. But by the time I got to the very top, my bucket literally toppled over. It just kind of flew, toppled over. It was upside down. And I rocked, and it kind of rocked me back and forth to that upside down position before the door that was over my head flew open.
Bless this soil, bless this earth, blessed with rhymes.
Controversial, I'm political, somewhat subliminal, philanthropic, non-conformist, so I'm criminal, I'm a criminal.
Did you hurt me? Don't be scared, see. When it all goes down, I'll be there.
There he is, IronE Singleton, still with us.
Drop that load, pack your dreams, and fly high with me. Fly high with me.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to BBTWD's In The Raw, Blind Side of the Walking Dead's In The Raw, Blind Side of the Walking Dead's In The Raw. I am your host, IronE Singleton. This is my lovely co-host, Miss Commaleta Singleton.
Hello, everybody.
All right, so, we're going to make it quick and sweet. Quick, short and sweet. She just told me that. We have to make it quick and sweet. We went to the movies the other night. Went to a special screening of a movie called Breakthrough.
I was wondering what tonight was going to be about.
So this movie was produced by Devon Franklin, and a wonderful individual, a very, very devoted person. He's very faith driven. I love everything. We both love everything that he's about. And we put up a post about the movie, and I think I saw somewhere where my wife remarked about doing a show about miracles, because Breakthrough is about miracles. It's about a little kid, accident happens, and then there's a miracle that takes place. And I don't want to give any of it away, so I'll just leave it at that. But the movie comes out April, just prior to Easter. I think maybe Easter weekend or days prior to that. So please go out and watch this movie, because it is an incredible movie, and you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, like Devon Franklin said. You're going to do all the above. So make sure you have your Kleenex and just enjoy the ride. But you said something about doing a show on that. We may do a show on miracles and the many miracles that we've had in our lives to allow us to get to where we are today.
Yeah.
So I'll just let you take over then and talk about your miracles.
Wow. Well, thank you. I didn't expect to talk about them so soon, but thank you for giving me the opportunity. This is soon for us, guys, because this is 2 days after we saw the premiere and one day after my post. But by the time you all see this, it'll probably be 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. So always remember that these episodes are a little bit behind after recording. But thank you for letting me share with everybody. Gosh, where do I start? I guess I can share the very first miracle that took place in my life. By the way, you have some of my lip gloss on your bottom lip there.
Oh.
Yeah, you got you got that lavender lip gloss.
I had to do some apologizing before we got going. Yes. So I got some lip gloss on my lips now. All right, because I wanted to make sure the energy was good for the show and everything, and I had to apologize.
We always shake it off. We shake it off, y'all. But okay,
I was late to the set, basically.
He was late to the set, but I've been late too, so I'll put that aside. But so the first miracle in my life took place when I was roughly about. Gosh, I must have been, my brother was about 3. We're 7 years apart. So I was about 10 or 11. And my mother took me to a fair. For those of you who are from Atlanta, you probably know very well that there is a huge fair that they bring periodically to the city that is located over near what used to be Turner Field Stadium in Atlanta, right off of Highway Interstate 75. And my mother took us there, and she gave me a few tickets. I wanted to ride the Ferris wheel because I'm adventurous. I love doing things that scare the dickens out of me. My mother, she's not down for that. She's never been down for that. She does not do heights at all, but she did not want to deprive her baby of the experience. So she gave me a few tickets. She took me through the line, and when I got maybe two or three people to the front, she left me there, told the attendant that, you know, she was going to leave me to ride, and she'd be watching me from across the way. She took my brother to a smaller ride just a distance away from me so that she could kind of keep me in eye-shot or earshot.
Let's do I too. I like I too. Let's do them both.
And so the attendant, I don't remember how he was or who he was a guy. I imagine that he must have been fairly young and inexperienced. You know, these rides are not, I don't think that they do a sufficient job in making sure that they are as up to standard and as up to code as they should be, because they package them and they move them often. But I get on, the gentleman let me get on the ride as a 10-year-old, little thin. I was so thin. I was just paper thin. I was tiny at 10 years old, just all skin and bones.
Like this.
And so he let me get on a Ferris wheel cart by myself.
So cute,
now, if you guys know, I don't know if they make them like this anymore now, but back then it was a little bucket that had seats on both sides. You know, seats across from one another. Generally, there are people on both sides to balance the bucket. He put me as a 10-year-old on the ride by myself, so naturally I didn't have enough weight to balance the bucket. And if you've seen these Ferris wheels, if there's a bucket that doesn't have people in them, sometimes they're just spinning freely. Okay, so the ride takes off. He sits me down. I put the little buckle on across my lap, and the the door shut, I think, on top of me. It was like one of those that kind of caged me in. And so I get to the very top of the Ferris wheel. You know how they stop the Ferris wheel so that they can put other people on at the bottom? And so ever so often they would stop the ride and the buckets would just sit. And my bucket, as I got higher and higher, my bucket would just rock more and more and more. And so, of course, I was sitting there and holding on. But by the time I got to the very top, my bucket literally toppled over. It just kind of flew, toppled over. It was upside down. And I rocked, and it kind of rocked me back and forth to that upside down position before the door that was over my head flew open. I was holding the bar that was in front of me, of course, and then, of course, with my body weight against it because of the positioning of the cart at that time. And it seemed that the cart was in that position for the longest time, for an eternity, what it felt like for me. Because, of course, holding on with the door open, looking down at people looking like ants on the pavement walking below me, and just knowing that I was about to fall to my fate, that I was... That was it. That was the end for me. There was nothing protecting me from falling out other than this flimsy seatbelt that wasn't even tightened across my skinny body. Of course, had I let go with my hands, the belt wouldn't have been enough to hold all of my weight to keep from falling out of the cart. So I held on, and I was screaming, of course, screaming. My voice isn't loud now as an adult, so you can imagine how tiny it was when I was 10 years old. It was quite small. And nobody acknowledged me. The ride just hung, and my hands started getting slippery, and it started being painful for me to hold on. And just as I didn't think that I could hold on any longer, when I felt that I, literally was about to just fall to my death, the Ferris wheel moved. Of course, I'm screaming and calling God, oh God, help me, somebody help me, please, oh God, please. And I'm crying and praying and trembling. And of course, the Ferris wheel moves, the door slams shut, and then I'm, gradually taken to the bottom, shaking like a leaf by the time I get to the bottom. And of course, I can't move because I'm traumatized from this experience. And the guy comes and he opens the door and he's like, come on, you gotta get out. And I'm like, trying to explain it. He's like, come on, little girl, come on, we gotta go, and I'm trying to explain, and it was like one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. But I knew in that moment, even as a 10-year-old, even as, even being as young as I was, that God's hands were all around that situation. I hadn't had too many situations to where I had personally felt that God intervened. But that day, I experienced a miracle. And I knew that there was something bigger and something greater that gave me another opportunity at life. And so I explained, I was telling my mom, of course, trembling, and my mom believed me right away. And she was panicking, and she went over and she gave the guy a piece of her mind. And, she was trying to tell, and they were like, no, she was fine and everything was fine. Nobody saw it, that didn't happen. And so, of course, it was a little 10-year-old word against theirs. There weren't a lot of cameras back then, so I'm pretty sure there were no surveillance cameras to prove what, or to authenticate my story. One of several near-death experiences, and that was just one of many.
Yeah. Well, we have a bunch of them. God is amazing. Don't cry because we don't have any Kleenex on the set. Just like we didn't have at the movie theater the other night. We just had a puddle on this side and a puddle on that side. But then you'd have a spotted shirt and it would look dirty. A lot of people who would join in the middle of it, they would think it's just a dirty shirt. So we don't. But that's such a.
We're in the raw.
Yeah. Wow, that's a deep story, but that's how amazing God is. For me, because, and I guess I wanted to touch on miracles because I want to kind of convey to people how blessed we all are, because I think that there are moments like that happen throughout everyone's life. Moments have happened like that throughout everyone's life to where we just kind of take for granted, or we put it in the back of our mind because, like you said, you probably just shut it out for so long because it was so traumatizing, whatever. And I think that was one of those stories that you realized later on in life. I think you were talking to me, you were like, I remember when I was a kid and this almost happened or something like that, was it? I don't know if you had always thought about it or if it just came as a revelation.
Yeah. Oh no. That was one that I never forgot, and I just, it always stood in the back of my mind. Not even in the back of my mind, but whenever I would, see a Ferris wheel or think to get on a Ferris wheel, I was always hesitant. So, needless to say, Ferris wheels are not my thing. I do roller coasters, but Ferris wheels have never really been my thing because of that.
It makes you appreciate life more. Did you appreciate life more after that, or just when you became an adult and you understood the depth, the brevity of how serious that situation was?
I appreciated my life being spared, and I think that even at that age, I questioned how and why, and what was the meaning behind it? You can't help but to think, why was I so fortunate in that moment? Because when you realize just how magical something seems, like, even then I knew that I think that, and I didn't understand this then, but I know that, when your adrenaline starts racing, I think that you get more strength than you normally have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the level of strength that I had to hold on at that time was probably more strength than I had ever had to use or administer for any other thing in my life, because it was life or death. It was like one of those life or death situations. And so, to answer your question, I didn't really put it all in perspective, but I was constantly trying to figure it out. I was constantly, questioning it and linking it. There were, that wasn't the only, that was the first. No, that was not the first. And I confirmed this with my mom last night. But she didn't think that she was home at the time that this happened, but I remembered her being there. So that was the only thing in the story that didn't have confirmation or that wasn't succinct. But prior to this, and maybe that's why there was so much questioning in this moment, prior to that, when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I was sitting outside on a rock in my grandmother's yard, calling a friend, a very, very best and close friend of mine that lived next door. Actually, she was a granddaughter of the neighbor of my great-grandmother. And I was calling her name. I was, Tawana, if you're watching this, what's up? Hey, shout, deuces, love you. But I was calling Tawana because I was trying to get her attention. I ain't having nothing to do, bored. And I called her for some time. She didn't answer. So I walked over to the front of my great-grandmother's house and sat on this porch, which was a square cinder block. Mm-hmm. It was a bunch of cinder blocks that made a square in front of the yard. So I sat on the cinder block, and of course there was dirt in front of the cinder block, but there was a paved walkway on the side of the cinder block. And so I continued calling her and playing, doing what 7-year-olds do. I don't know, doing something to pass the time. And after a while, I hear something first. It's a snake sound, like. And I turn and look, and there is this huge. My mom tells me the color of the snake because I didn't remember the colors of the snake. I vaguely remember it being black, but she confirmed it was a black snake. And she thinks that it was a moccasin snake. But she said that the snake, I'll tell it in a minute, but the snake was reared up in strike position, and it was going back and forth like it was trying to find a prime, spot to strike. I scream at the top of my lungs, and it like kind of reared back like this, and then as soon as it struck, my aunt bursts through the door, snatches me in the house, snatches me up off of the cinder block and into the house, and the snake misses me, but it strikes. And I don't expect that it would have killed me, hopefully not, but I was quite thin, and I do expect and think and remember my neighbor confirming after he took its life, ended its life. He caught it and got rid of it for us, unfortunately. But he confirmed that it was a poisonous snake. So
that's another miracle.
Yeah,
that's another miracle.
I was moments from being bitten by the poisonous snake, and who knows if no one would have heard me or come to my rescue, I could have been just lying there, letting the venom penetrate.
You were single digits, so you probably wouldn't have made. You probably wouldn't have survived that.
I was very little.
So
that was the first time, and that I never forgot that. I mean that was such a traumatic situation that even as a young girl, I remembered the details of that moment, and it made me, of course, quite fearful of snakes. But again, another survival story to where just moments or something changing or happening differently.
Let me interject a miracle. My whole life's a miracle.
Yes, it is.
All right, we'll start with number one. I was born and raised in the projects, basically, and I'm here today. So I'm here. I made it. You're not. It's statistics say that it's very unlikely that you will make it and you will become a success. But I'm here to tell everybody that was born under that type of situation that don't believe it. Don't believe the hype, And you just have to have faith, like in the movie, like in Breakthrough. I think with Breakthrough, you laid out, you posed a bunch of questions like what, why, who. We know it's God. We know there's a higher power and effect that brought you through those things. And those are the questions that'll be laid out for you when you watch the movie Breakthrough. So make sure y'all go check that out. Next month when it comes out. Yeah. I I was born to a mother that was addicted to drugs, and she was also an alcoholic. And my father wasn't there in my life, so I saw him twice in my life. And my brother, and you've heard the story, many of you have heard the story before. My brother was arrested for the first time when he was 14. I was 12 at that time, so he's almost 2 years older than I am. And many things happened around me, many friends died, but I'll get more specific. There was an incident where I went to, so many, but when I went to meet a girl so that we could have sex, go to the hotel and have sex. I was about 16, 17 years old. That's when I did a lot of my dirt, when I was 16 and 17 years old, not 7, but 17. And I went to pick her up, and I was hanging out at the Church of Chicken, waiting on her to come. And as I was waiting, I saw a guy that looked like a crack addict. And he came over to me, he approached me, and he got close to me, and I had my gun with me at that time because I carried a gun. I sold drugs. I was living that life. I was living that life, guys. And as he got closer to me, it was like everything just slowed down and went in slow motion. Mm-hmm. And I pulled my gun out, and I was on the verge of pulling that trigger. And he spotted it, and it seemed like his eyes got as big as 2 beach volleyballs. Mm-hmm. And he turned away, and because I was definitely going to pull that trigger. There's no doubt in my mind, with the mindset I had then, mm-hmm. it wouldn't have taken too much for me to pull the trigger. It would not have, because of what I had been, the way I had been conditioned. Mm-hmm. So it spared that guy's life, and it spared my life, because I would surely be in prison. But most of my miracles kind of revolve around me either not getting shot and killed, or me not shooting and killing somebody else. And there was one when my brother, 16, 17 years old, my brother parked, and I talk about that in the show. I talk about it in my one-man show, Blindside by the Walking Dead. And my brother gets into a confrontation with the guy who was parked in front of our door. My brother tries to park, and he wouldn't let my brother park. And so my brother rushed in the house in a frenzy, upset, angry, and everybody in the household had a gun except for my grandmother. And at any given time, it was up to 11 of us living in the apartment together. But at this particular time, there were only about 5 or 6 of us in the apartment. And so I grabbed my gun, my brother grabbed his gun, my cousin grabbed his gun, my aunt, she had a 2-shooter, she had a Derringer that she would keep on her side, and she had her gun. I ran outside with my cousin and my brother, and we had the guns pointed at this individual that I grew up with. Somebody we grew up with too. And that's how sad this whole situation is. But that was the world that we were in, and that situation would not make anybody bat an eyelash, people from that situation, because it was just so, regular. It was just par for the course, basically. And I had the gun pointed at him, and I was the youngest of all of us, of all the kids in the family. My grandfather standing in the doorway, my aunt standing in the doorway also with their guns in hand. And I got my gun pointed. So I went, and then we had a whole bunch of people around us just watching all of this unfold on a Friday or Saturday night. And I was ready to pull the trigger then. For some reason, I wanted to prove that I was tough. I wanted to prove that just because I was the youngest didn't mean that I was soft. Mm-hmm. That, look, I can make a statement too. And if his cousin hadn't come over to take him away, because the guy was drunk, I think he was kind of drunk, he was inebriated, and I probably would have pulled that trigger. So he threw him in the back of the car, and he sped off. He pulled off, he apologized to us, and they left the scene. That was another miracle that just spared my life. It just seemed like every time, every step along the way, when I had those incidents, God just had me covered, And, but yeah, that question will be posed a lot, like, why me? Why was I saved? Mm-hmm. Why did God save me? And you'll ask that question when you watch that movie. As a matter of fact, somebody asked that question, something similar to it in the movie, and it's very revealing. It's a very revealing movie, and a lot of poignant points made in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that question, it kind of bugged me not say bugged me, but it was just perplexing. I didn't understand and have answers really until much later on in life. Yeah. But there were several other situations where my life was spared, and I think that it was probably the situation when I was in my little car, Shawty Red. There was another situation before that, but for the sake of time, I'll just tell the Shawty Red story.
Shawty Red,
But,
Shawty Red. That's how we say it in Atlanta. Shawty.
So I had a little Daihatsu. I don't know if you all have even heard of that type of vehicle. I don't see them these days, but it was a little red Daihatsu, and
I gave you that name, didn't I?
No, that was the model.
Shawty Red. I'm talking about Shawty Red.
Oh, Shawty Red. No, that was.
I think I gave it Shawty Red. I think I gave Shawty Red. You had Blue Thunder.
I gave it Blue Thunder.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow. She taking my name. She taking the names I gave to her vehicles. But go ahead.
He made it his own though. He had another level of swag when he said it. But so I was traveling along 285, coming home from an internship at the CDC that I had that summer. This was college. This was, I think, my sophomore year of college. And I was traveling back to my mom's house on 285 in rush hour traffic, and I was traveling in the far right lane near an exit ramp. A vehicle entering the highway on an exit ramp. It was a sports car. I don't know what type of vehicle it is. I just remember it being a black vehicle. And it was looked like it may have been a sports car, something that was pretty fast. But
and her car went about 30 miles per hour max.
35.
Oh, 35.
Unless downhill, then it was about 60.
It was slower than a moped. Okay,
but anyway, the car enters the highway, and I was in that lane, and traffic wasn't really moving fast. But by the time I caught sight of it, it was too late for me to react and move over. And there was no room for it to get on the highway, and it scraped my car, moving at probably about 60, 70 miles per hour. I don't know. But when it hit my little Daihatsu, because the car was so little and light, it bumped me, and I kind of veered out of control. And when I turned, when the car turned, it did it so quickly at the speed that I was going that the car lost control. To the point, and I don't know, any of you that have been in an accident may be able to attest to this, but it lost control to the point to where it was like someone was literally driving or taking the wheel. Like it was like looping, and I couldn't even hold it. I couldn't catch it because it was moving so fast. You know what I mean? The wheel was just spinning in so many directions. And so the car was flip-flopping all over the place, like back and forth. And then it was doing this so much back and forth, from one side to the next, that it just flopped up on two wheels like it was about to flip and turn over in traffic. And by then, all of the traffic behind me had stopped, because when you see a car out of control, everybody backed off. But the car went up on two wheels, bounced back down, and when it bounced back down, it did something, I don't even know how it did it, but the car turned completely around on the highway to where I was facing a tractor trailer coming at me very slowly. I mean, it had slowed down, but the tractor trailer was right in front of me, and the car was sitting in the middle of the highway in the opposite position, but it wasn't, the steering wheel was still doing its spin move thing. So the car was, pivoting and bouncing. And then the end of this ordeal, guys, by the end of this ordeal, my car bounced across without hitting any other vehicles. I think that it barely scathed a car that was in front of me, the very front of the car. This is a full highway, and my car touched nothing other than the very frontmost area of another vehicle. But by the time this ordeal finished, by the time I finished flipping up on two wheels, turning completely backwards, my car skipped and skid over to the side of the highway and parked. It stopped and parked. It stopped on the side of the highway, on the shoulder, by the wall area. It didn't hit the wall. Didn't hit the median. It was just right there beside it, in a perfect parallel, away from traffic, away from everything. That's where it finished, and it was totaled. Like the wheels were squished. They were like bent in, so it had to be towed. It could not drive. I could not have feasibly driven, and that's what they were freaking at the people that came to tow the car. They were like, where did it start and how did it finish? And because there was no way that I could have, the car was placed, and so I know for me that was again my life spared. that was God, that was angels, that was something that was higher and bigger, that was sparing my life for a purpose. So that's why I live my life so purpose driven. Because I don't take for granted that I'm here, and I don't take for granted what's been given to me.
There it is.
And so if you ever, see or hear me or, talk to me and you wonder, ain't I got time for that? She's a little bit, too, I guess, too committed to trying to do certain things a certain way. But I know that that's really what it is. It's because there have been so many instances in my life.
But guess what, though? I think everybody has had those moments. And it seems as though by having those moments, you would want to live your life on purpose. So, thank God for you and your accidents and everything you've been able to overcome, and for putting you in my life, in my world. So I had one, and I had another one. All my miracles revolve around guns and drugs, guys. So forgive me. I was 9th grade. I introduced a friend of mine. I introduced multiple people to drugs, and we clicked off. I got to click off there, but I introduced multiple people to the drug game, and this is 9th grade. This individual comes back to me. I'll really sum it up. But my junior year in college, and of course I was a struggling college student at UGA, go dog sickle. And he came to me. He had become a big time kingpin at that time. 7 years later. And he told me he was making about 10 grand a week. He needed somebody he could trust, and he could trust me because I had always shown myself to be a loyal person. The same person I brought into the game came back to me to ask me if I wanted to be in the dope game. And of course I kindly declined and said, no, my life is on a different path right now. I'm on a different track. I'm doing things differently. I'm living to please God, and so on and so forth. Fast forward a few weeks after that, maybe a month or so, whatever, I get word that he was murdered. And along with his uncle. It was a double murder. So I ended up having to attend a double funeral. They had the two bodies head to head, basically, and feet going in opposite directions. So, and you remember, babe, baby, rest in peace.
Yeah, but I didn't know that it was his uncle too.
Yeah, it was both of them. So he went with him to do a drop, to make a drop or to make a pickup. And I do feel and believe that had I taken on that situation to become a part of his group, his posse, if you will, or whatever, then that probably would have been me. Because I probably would have been in it heavy, because I definitely would have had a major responsibility, a major role in what it was he was doing. But I feel like I was saved then because I chose to listen and obey that particular moment. But we just, we talk about these different miracles, and we talk about them just so that you guys can acknowledge your miracles. But I think the biggest miracle of all, I really do feel the biggest miracle of all, and the miracle that I feel like this right now, and the miracle that we all take for granted, is a woman having a child.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Bringing life into this world. Bringing life into this world.
Yeah. The conception as well. I mean, that whole process.
The whole process is a miracle.
Yeah.
And we were talking, the wife and I were talking about, we had a spiritual conversation, which we have many of, and we're talking about God's chosen people. A lot of people go around, you hear people talking about God's chosen people this and God chosen people. And I speculated, and I said, but I had an epiphany. Even this is part of the epiphany I had back in 2001 coming from Los Angeles, that there are two types of people, man and woman. And woman is the chosen people. I just kind of feel that, and I think I'm really at a point to where I'm almost embracing that as the case, because I think about all of the destruction that is committed in the world. And man, we tend to have more of a destructive nature, or for some reason, and we have to work through that though. But women, they have children. They create life. They're the reason why we are here today, which is an amazing thing. It's the most miraculous thing, because otherwise we wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't have had all those other things that happened to us if it were not for you and the rest of your sisters out there in the world. So shout out to the women. And please change this thing around. And shout out to the women that are in Congress right now. And just y'all doing big things. Keep doing big things, and hopefully y'all, you'll be the ones to get this ship back on the right track.
Thank you. That's some kind of that's a huge honor to give women that torch, to say that you feel that we're the chosen ones. And I can't say that I necessarily agree or disagree with you. I think that there are different times and different moments where there's a season for different people to take the lead and take the torch. And I do think that this is our season. I do think that this is the season for women to kind of take the step up, to have your backs, to have your backs, because we have to do this thing together. And whenever there is an imbalance, I think in life, nature has a way of rebalancing things for the greater good.
So we had the torch and we just set everything on fire.
Women,
where are you? Put out the fire!
A little bit, but
well, on that note, you want to close us on out with something for the road?
I think that's it. I think here's a closing note. I think that it's important, guys, as we talk about miracles, that, like you said, IronE, that everyone, be still in their space long enough to listen and hear and understand their purpose, embrace and realize all of the miracles that are around you, that happen in your life, that happen in our lives every day, miracles that have affected you and that have touched your lives either directly or indirectly as you walk this life journey. And just, take a moment to just think about the enormity of that, and just how life must be bigger than just one individual or one instance, but there has to be a higher and a bigger purpose and a bigger calling. And just knowing or being able to realize what that is and embracing it. I think that we will all be, in this world, will be in a better place if we all took time to do that.
Beautiful. Breakout coming out next month.
Breakthrough.
My bad.
He was close.
Breakthrough. My bad.
Beautiful movie.
Yeah, my bad.
Beautiful.
So it's coming out next month, and I encourage you all to go see it and take your families. It's a family affair. Love you guys. Love each other. It's free. Peace, guys.